State of the State address, and I begin by acknowledging the Tasmanian Aboriginal community, in particular the Moonina people, as the original owners and custodians of the land on which we are today, Nipaluna Hobart in Lutruwita, Tasmania. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. I acknowledge their continued connection to the Tasmanian Aboriginal people to this land for over 40,000 years, despite invasion and dispossession, the rich and enduring culture that lives in that connection. Mr President, I would join with my colleagues here, many of whom have acknowledged Premier Will Hodgman on his retirement from Parliament, and I thank him for the service that he provided to the state and to our community and wish him well with his endeavours henceforth for him and his family. I particularly congratulate new Premier Peter Gutwein that not many new premiers step in and then face something of such a magnitude, a challenge of such magnitude in the early days of their premiership. So I thank him for the efforts he's making. Congratulations to the member for Prosser on her new position as a minister. And of course, join others in a very excited congratulations to the member for Pembroke, Joe, and Daniel, her partner, on becoming parents of Ivy. I want to thank all the members in this chamber for their thorough and considered responses so far today and yesterday. We're all making these speeches in response to the Premier's State of the State address, an address which really could have been given in a different world to the one that we're now in. And it's challenging for us to frame our contributions as a response to that address, but to also recognise this very difficult, fast-moving and the uncertain times that we are in today. Members have walked this line in their speeches very effectively, and I thank them for it, speaking eloquently and passionately about the issues that are important to their constituents and communities. This is the first time since being elected as the member for Nelson that I have had the opportunity to provide a reply to the Premier's State of the State address. To do so in such unique circumstances will certainly make it memorable for me in years to come, but I think that it will be quite a departure probably from the usual model. Indeed, I'm sure it's now clear to all of this that 2020 as a year will be a very memorable year in all our lives and quite a departure from the norm. The disruptions to our normal lives that we have in store for us for many months to come will render 2020 quite an exceptional experience. I've spoken to my children about the fact that they may well one day tell their grandchildren about this year and describe to those future grandchildren the challenges that we all faced together. I'd like to recognise that we here are among the most privileged in our capacity to weather this storm. Compared to most others in our community, we have a great deal of advantage. Compared to most others in our communities, we are financially secure. I would suggest that all of us would have secure housing that we are able to afford. We have the capacity to meet our health needs. I would suggest that we all have networks of support that we could reach out to if we have the need. And I imagine that most of us would be in a position to ensure that our own immediate family members can also be safe and secure at this time in their basic needs. Mr President, we are very fortunate. We are not faced with the same intensity of personal challenge that many Tasmanians are facing in what must be very uncertain and quite terrifying circumstances for many. Those who face a risk not just to perhaps their immediate health, but also to their livelihoods, to their housing security, to their connections with family and the broader community. People in these circumstances are having to manage great anxiety and fear. I can only imagine, and my heart goes out to them, that they are placed in this situation. I know there's also many other people who are bearing the responsibility for others that rely on them as we progress through this uncertain time. I'm thinking here of people who run businesses and are employers of those whose jobs might be at risk right now, and people who provide support and care to those who are vulnerable. And especially I'm thinking of our health workers who are going above and beyond to ensure that people are provided with the right medical care. In light of all of this, Mr President, I plan to be quite general and brief in my comments. I will look forward to next year when, under different circumstances, I can make a more perhaps usual State of the State response. And so I'll just mention briefly, in the 10 months since I've had the privilege of being elected as a member for Nelson, one of the things that has struck me about this place is the value of having members who come from such varied backgrounds And I wanted to mention it today because I see our backgrounds and experiences that have probably been quite a factor in what inspired us all to run for election and enter into the role of public service. I see those backgrounds and experiences are also often what shapes the issues that are important to each of us, those things that are a particular focus and for which we work passionately to achieve outcomes for our state. We've heard that echoed in the speeches that have been given in response to the State of the State, and that's really why I regard the variety of backgrounds and experiences present here amongst members as a real strength of our chamber. I thank members for bringing that and sharing it. The Tasmanian community, I think, would hope to see itself reflected and represented in this place, and we're doing better towards that end. As the first woman elected to the seat of Nelson, I'm part of what I regard as a much more appropriate gender balance in our chamber, with a majority of female members. However, I think we still have a great distance to go in achieving other aspects of appropriate inclusion and diversity here. In particular, I think, as I say this, of a lack of cultural diversity and a lack of inclusion of people with a disability, for instance. So may we continue to see progress on both those areas in coming years. People are aware that in terms of my background and experience, my entire professional life has been working towards achieving a fairer and more equitable Tasmania. My attention generally turns to bread and butter social issues that the people of Nelson and those, in fact, across the whole of Tasmania face every day. Whether that's making sure Tasmanians have a roof over their heads, or that they have access to the right health and social services when they need them, or speaking up on issues in which we can do much better, such as poker machine reform. It's a priority for me to use opportunities I have to provide a voice for those Tasmanians who need it most. Homeless Tasmanians, young Tasmanians, unemployed Tasmanians, Tasmanians who are unwell or at risk, the people that I would term, I guess, broadly vulnerable Tasmanians. This has been a focus of my work before coming to politics, and it continues to be a priority. And that's why I was pleased to hear the Premier in his address emphasise his commitment to becoming a government of compassion. And as the member for McIntyre and others have mentioned in their contributions today, this is a time in which compassion will not just be an aspiration for us, but an absolutely essential reality in the way that we treat each other and behave. Not just in our personal interactions, but in the structural responses and measures that we put in place across all levels of government. More than ever, compassion needs to sit at the heart of our public decisions made and the structural supports we provide and the responsibilities of government. I firmly believe that we will best weather this storm together on the strength of our compassion. And I believe that acts of compassion build trust, and a government that acts with genuine compassion, not just in words, but also in behaviours and decisions, will garner the trust of the community. There's almost nothing I'd like to see more in Tasmania than for trust in government to grow and for us to become a real national exemplar in this area. For years we've witnessed what I would think is serious erosion of the public's trust in us as politicians and elected representatives. It's an issue that's not confined to Tasmania, but we've seen evidence of this sort of erosion of trust all over the world and nationally. I think that trust in governments is eroded through the pursuit of simplistic solutions or the exploitation of fear and division, particularly towards political gain rather than community benefit. We've seen it play out internationally, and we must acknowledge that a lack of trust in government is also a very Tasmanian issue. For too long we've witnessed what I would think is unedifying political bickering. For too long we've witnessed how big money has compromised politicians, parties and elections, and for too long we've witnessed cosy deals that have achieved far too little overall for Tasmanian people. So it comes as a little surprise that public's confidence in us has deteriorated in recent times, but it's not to say that we cannot reverse this. We as elected members can help and do our bit to start restoring the public's trust. I want to remind all members that restoring the public's trust in us is achievable, and I'm just going to mention briefly two things that are available to us right now to do just that. We could reform electoral donation laws in the very near future before our next election, so the public can have confidence that political and policy outcomes cannot be bought by those with the deepest pockets. Given Tasmania's nationally weakest donation laws and a clear recommendation made from an inquiry process, reform is necessary and urgent in this state. Reducing the influence of big money would be a major step forward in building public trust. And another straightforward reform measure would be to provide genuinely proper funding and capacity to key transparency and accountability mechanisms. For example, increasing the capacity of the Ombudsman, who's responsible for reviewing RTI requests. Some increase has occurred, but not enough to make a tangible difference, and delays of many years in processing these reviews is unacceptable. It represents a terrible lack of transparency and an inability for the government to be truly held to account. Mr President, these are just two matters which have the potential to tangibly build some of the trust and faith in our political system that we're lacking at the moment. Bringing back that trust, though, isn't something that government can do on its own. Individually, as elected members of Parliament, we can play a part. We can begin by the way we act and present ourselves in Parliament and in our communities. I think politicians can lead from the front. We can be open, honest and truly accountable in our decision-making to our constituents. So restoring public trust in Parliament is important. So too is ensuring our government delivers on its promise of supporting all Tasmanians. I look forward to, once we are through this very difficult time at the moment, being involved in discussions and efforts from the government to see this truly play out. We know that indicators have been going in the wrong direction in many social issues over time. In fact, TASCOS provided us with a recent report measuring progress in Tasmania, which confirms this. It makes poor reading, and I would like to think that we can look ahead to the next 6 years as an opportunity to actually move in the opposite direction and build from where we are now in crisis and in extremity, but build forward from that and improve. Now, I recognise that when things are in this sort of uncertain and crisis situation, things get a bit wobblier when people are called on to be compassionate. People get caught up in panicky actions during a crisis, but I also see many, many people reaching out selflessly to help others. I hope as we stick together and manage as best as we can over the next, say, 6 months, we'll all have our sense of community expanded and enriched through this. I hope that compassionate and people-centred emergency actions and support provided by the government over this time will also lead to an expanded and enriched ongoing approach from the government on key social policy areas. Once our emergency crisis situation is eventually resolved, I hope we'll see a distinct trajectory of improvement over the years in our social indicators, building on the connections and compassion we're drawing on right now. Mr President, while in other circumstances I might focus on a whole range of specifics from the Premier's speech and on certain of my own priorities, today I'm going to stick to these just general remarks. I would like to conclude by offering my sincere best wishes to the Premier, to the Health Minister, and to the Cabinet members, the many crucial teams of public servants who are currently working extremely hard to do the best for our state. They are all showing true leadership and determination in the face of uncertainty and fear, and a future that holds enormous challenges for us all. I thank them for the work that they are doing, and I know that we all stand ready to best support our community in coming days.
The honourable member for